Well, thanks, Neha. It's great to be with you here in person. Is anyone wearing pajama bottoms? No. So this is our agenda for the day, as Neha mentioned. We're a little tight in here. If you want to, fill in other seats or turn your chairs around so you can see the slides, please do so. We weren't anticipating this many people. This is the biggest leadership forum we've ever had, to my recollection. I've been doing it for a lot of years. So this is just the overview of our goals for CME purposes. We do have CME for this. Disclosures are here, which are basically none from all of our speakers. There are some disclosures, and you can see here, and then just more statements. So I'm going to talk about something called auto leadership, which is really team-based, team-oriented leadership. I'll talk about forming the right team, about recognizing, rewarding team members and individuals, about delegation, which is a key learned skill, and then succession planning, which is something that probably not many of you are thinking about right now, but maybe you should be in terms of you moving up in your world. And I'm going to make it case-based. We'll do some adult learning here. Because we won't be able to go for the time into small table discussion, you're going to have to kind of communicate and reach out and just pretend you're on Zoom. So again, no disclosures. For the benefit of the SAEM Foundation, which I have been serving as president of this year, we were doing a book signing. So if you'd like to buy a book for a resident or a medical student or yourself, I'd be happy to sign it in the exhibit hall. There'll be 2 times tomorrow when we'll do that. So Neha said, would you like to do a talk on auto leadership? I said, yeah, that sounds cool. I didn't really know what it was. And so I started searching. I figured I could learn about auto leadership. I kind of had an idea what it was. But everything I was looking up, it was all about autocratic leadership. And we have a shining example of that in Putin. But the best way to think of auto leadership is that it's just the opposite of autocratic leadership. And those are some of the concepts that I'll try to go through today. Lao Tzu, this kind of mythical ancient Chinese figure, is credited with lots of quotes. This is one that is, I think, the test of time is that it's got lots of he's in it, but it's also, if you look at the viewpoint, it's really the leader setting the aim, which might work sometime, but I kind of modified what I think the more modern viewpoint is when you have an agreed upon mission, vision, values that everyone has contributed to, and then the leader, really their whole purpose is to focus their work on creating and sustaining that through building a team that accomplishes the MVV. So really the auto leader, I think, is more like the conductor of an orchestra or symphony. It's someone who is able to take a bunch of musicians playing multiple instruments. Professional musicians could all play, and they would probably figure it out to some extent to be able to make a sound reading from their music that would be okay. But obviously the conductor pulls it all together, makes it work. So I think auto leadership is also that for in terms of how I would think about it. So I use this slide a lot just in terms of in leadership development talks. It's from Patrick Lencioni's book, Overcoming the 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. But the idea for auto leadership is that this trust foundation is extremely important. And if you've seen leaders come into places where the culture is not trusting, does not feel safe, then you have to do a lot of work in that realm to get to that point. So good leaders focus on trust. And then if you have a trusting group, you can then handle through your communications, which are going to be, again, trustworthy communications. You can handle conflict. You can deal with the tough issues. And then if you have those 2 things, you develop a true sense of commitment to each other and a real sense of we're in this together. We're doing something positive, but we're doing it together. And then at that point, if you have all these things, then you can hold each other accountable. If someone is doing something that doesn't seem to be consistent with your MVV, then you can talk to them about it. And because you can handle conflict, you can have accountability as well. And then if you get all those things together, you have the top of the pyramid, you have positive results. And if you aren't having positive results, you have to kind of go back down through the layers. But it's a really good book. It should be on everyone's leadership shelf to look at this book. So I'd encourage you to read that. A lot more stuff on it. You know, Michigan is known as a university, and through mainly its football team, the team. And so when the football players come out into the field of the big house, they see this is the last thing they see, and it's supposed to motivate them. And then the locker rooms, the team. And so Bo Schembechler, the great football coach, was responsible for that kind of the team. He actually was an autocratic leader. A good friend of mine covered him for the Ann Arbor News sports. He was a sports editor, and Bo was clearly an autocratic leader. It was like his, what he said, things go. But his team bought into the team philosophy. So the different players functioned in a way that you would say was actually living that ideal of the team. And just a quote that, I just think this quote about, if it's all about you, then you're just going to, at the end, be left with just you, which is kind of sad. So auto leadership is not autopilot in that you can see this Tesla that was one of the early autopilot self-driving cars didn't do so well on that day. But the idea is that there still needs to be a driver. It can be a driver that's obviously very inclusive and gets opinions from everyone. But you have to be present. You have to engage with your team. You're not just handing over the entity to everyone else. If you're designated as a leader, you're going to be there to be available for consultation all the time. And then sometimes you're going to step in. You may have to do a deep dive into a problematic area, but you're not. It's not autopilot here that we're talking about. And also, you can advance things that you're very much are a priority for you. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, I love this photo where you see all the photos of her with her robe on and looking like she's about to die, but she was a vibrant person for all of her career. And so I like to show pictures of RBG that are a little younger, and there are some even younger ones when she's in her 30s. But anyway, but I love this quote from her that as an auto leader, you can still fight for the things that you strongly believe in, because hopefully those are in your overall mission, vision, values of your entity, and you'll be able to inspire others to lead. So it's not like you're giving up everything as the auto leader. There may be things that are really important to you, and you're trying to rally people to believe in it and fight for it. So obviously putting a team together is really key, and you may be in a situation where you have a team you're taking over, and you may not have a lot of ability to move new people into that team. But in most cases, there's some turnover, and you'll have to be in a situation of recruiting new team members. So Sue Stern is the best at this at University of Washington, pulling together an incredible team of faculty there. But Sue is extremely diligent about doing the due diligence on recruiting people. And that, Lencioni again, this is kind of a narrative book called The Ideal Team Player, but it's about recruitment, basically, and how you get the right people on the bus, as they say. And he condenses it down to three things: hungry, humble, and smart. So hungry is someone who's obviously very inspired, very motivated. You can just sense their energy when you're talking to them about their enthusiasm for coming into your environment and working really hard. The humble part is that they are service-oriented, that they, in your discussions with them, it's not all me about, the creature comforts of the role or something. People that are truly humble and are able to come in and not be disruptive because their egos are enormous. And then the smart that Lencioni refers to is the EQ, or the emotional intelligence. So not the smart. And I think we make that error of sometimes being really enamored with people who are super smart and have high levels of intelligence in an area, and so we want them on the team. But numerous examples I can think of, and one I'm dealing with right now in my dean role at Michigan, of someone who is super smart, who's come in and been horribly disruptive to a team and has had really poor leadership characteristics and is not going to do well there. But because people were so focused on the R01 grants and the high level, but if they had done even a little due diligence back to this person's previous staff and people they worked with, it would have been very ugly, but that wasn't done. So again, Sue does a great job with this, and I don't know if anything you want to say about it, Sue, but it's really important to think about hungry, humble, and smart when you're putting people on your team. It's a simple thing to think of. Again, the book goes into more detail on that. So let's get you involved a little bit here. Think of a recent great resuscitation case, and again, not maybe one that you were running, but one that you were there at. What leadership characteristics contributed to the success of a great case? It may not have been a great outcome. It may just be one that was run particularly well. So thoughts? What would be? Any of you had a good case lately, or been involved with one that?
Brian, what about designated roles so everyone knew what they were supposed to do?
Yeah, I think that's really key. So we try to teach that to our residents. But yeah, so everyone knew their role and presumably functioned in that role. Thanks. Yes?
With trust. So when you delegate a task, you can trust that your team member is going to be able to effectively do that task.
Yeah, you're going to do whatever, align now, and I'm pretty confident you're going to be able to do that. Great. So trust? Yes?
Shared mental model, that everybody's on the same page regarding what the goals are for the resuscitation or whatever.
Yeah, and that can change during the course of it, obviously. Okay, good.
And openness to feedback. So,
Yeah.
like, hey, you have an idea of what we should do next. And the leader hears that and verbalizes it for you and amplifies
Right. Yeah, and anyone would be feel comfortable providing that feedback during the resuscitation. Great points. Yep. Yes.
I've been a resuscitation that didn't have a good outcome, and it was very emotionally upsetting a young person. And everybody got a chance to participate in the resuscitation, doing chest compressions, things like that, in roles that they wouldn't necessarily have done before, which I think helped overall how upsetting it was when we declared a patient.
All right. Thank you. Important. Yes.
And this may build on some of the other points that are made, but I think it's a building block, and it's a psychology of safety within the team, even before the resuscitation, and really driving out fear from your organization. Because that is, I think, the building block for being able to speak up, being able to have everybody on the team be a change maker, and many, many other things or components of a functional team that we like to have.
Great. Yeah, great points. And that starts even before that you're doing the preparation with the team to have people feel that comfortable. Great.
I think it should be part of the fabric of the organization, of your department, of your team, the greater organization, team of teams that work in the department.
Great. Thank you. Yes.
Proactive in tackling small problems before they become big ones.
Okay. Yeah. So again, that anyone could speak up to say that there seems to be a problem here. Yeah. Before it becomes a bigger one. Good. Well, you covered every one thing on my list. The one thing it was kind of hinted at, but I think debriefing, is a really good thing in terms of leadership characteristics. Yeah. So this is you hit pretty much everything I would say there. Define roles, open but controlled discussion. Every team member could contribute at debriefing, and then you brought up a number of others. So thanks. So I want to focus now on delegation, which is just an essential component of auto leadership, right? So you have to be able to delegate, and I think a lot of burnout that I see, especially in younger leaders, is because they haven't figured out how to delegate, and the weight of the world is on their shoulders. They have to do everything, they have to be involved in everything, and they aren't yet able to kind of give up stuff and trust others to do things. And this is a great quote from Booker T. Washington that a few things can help an individual more than to place responsibility on them and then let them know that you trust them. Again, getting back to Lindsay, trust, that you trust them enough to do that. And the trust doesn't mean that you're 100% certain that they're always going to do it right and not need some correction or guidance. It's just that you put the trust in them. So I think it's just an outstanding quote related to delegation. And if you think about delegation, I think it's very key that you don't make assumptions about what people can do until you give them a little try at doing it. So there are many people in my career that where trusting them enough to give them a task that might have been a little bit above where they were just then, I was amazed to see, because they were so eager to get it done, and with the proper guidance, they performed better than I thought they could in that role. So I think it's really important to do that. So another little exercise here, I'd ask you to think of an auto leader, a mentor, a coach, someone that you might have role modeled often. And just what are the characteristics that stand out in the way that they led their team? And then I'll give you a few characteristics about John Wooden, who everyone would agree is basketball's greatest coach. I'm sorry, I like sports, so I tend to work a lot of sports stuff into my but he never emphasized winning, but he won the most NCAA championships of any by far, and won 7 in a row. I mean, just unheard of to think that could happen nowadays. But anyway, so role models that you've had, what are, in terms of what we're talking about here, auto leadership, what are some characteristics in how they led their teams, things that come at you from people that you've admired in their leadership, or maybe you've been fortunate to have please?
Being with the team, not being in front of the team.
Okay. So so being with the team, not in front. Elaborate a little bit more. So you would say that they're not the supervisor, they're in the mix.
Yes.
Okay.
To help them, like for example, if they have any delegated tasks they need to perform, to help them with that, not to just guide them and leave them.
Right.
Or just to be engaging with them.
Yeah, really, really good point. Any other? Yes, in the back.
John Wooden had the best talent. You recruited the absolute. I mean, he had Kareem for 4 years. He just simply got the best players.
But also I think the best players wanted to play for him obviously because of his success, but also his approach was much more as a mentor. Again, he could be tough on individuals, but he, other, please.
I think
Ms.
just anytime somebody can lead by example and not words, that is the most compelling. And somebody that you know is going to be in the trenches with you, like they can ask you to do something. It's very compelling if you know that they would do the same thing. Like they're there with you. They're not asking you to do something that they wouldn't do themselves.
Yeah, if you're a leader, I mean, in emergency medicine, we're a very clinically based specialty, but I've seen chairs struggle who have been not enough immersed in the clinical thing. You've got to kind of be able to bring it clinically to have that credibility. And so I think most chairs get that and realize that, but I've seen in a couple instances where the connection with the clinical environment wasn't strong enough. Yes.
As well as that credibility, but I think vision as well.
Vision as well. Okay.
Yeah. So having Curry, shares what the outcome and strategy that they want the team to get to.
Yeah.
And brings the team along with that.
Yeah. I think one of the things that the pandemic has done is it's kind of taken away your visioning for most people. It's just like, I want to get through the next day and the next week. But it really is the leader's vision. Say, there will be an end to the pandemic. And then I'm thinking about what we're going to be doing in a 3 to 5 year window. And I'm sharing that with you as a team now because we need to just get out of the day-to-day thinking. So I think that's a really important point. Here and then here. Sorry.
Leading by example,
Okay.
being a little bit vulnerable, just enough vulnerable.
That's really key. And some of my most meaningful moments were as a chair, or even in this dean role I'm in now, is where I've said, I didn't get that right the first time. And it's amazing how if you do that and you just appear more human to the people you're trying to lead, and it also kind of gives them permission that that if the leader made an error or a misjudgment, and they're kind of admitting it and saying, let's get on from there, that I could probably do that too, and I won't be as fearful about maybe taking some risks. So good point.
I think a genuine interest in the individual and their own personal growth and development.
Yeah.
I'm a Tar Heel, so I look more to games. And my players who like very much integrated into every player's family.
Yeah.
Not only like how they showed up on the court, but how they were off the court as well.
That's a really key point. Yeah, that having that connection, it can be challenging if you're we have a lot of our chair development program people here. If you're a chair of 100 people or you've got 5 sites, and like how do you make a personal connection? But so you may not be able to do that to the extent that you would hope, but you want to make sure the next level of people are feeling that. And then you're just trying to make those personal connections really important. Please. Listening. I couldn't agree more. Yeah. So being a great listener, it's one thing to be able to orate and talk a lot, but listening is really key. And creating the forums where you're getting that listening. Yeah. Thanks.
I think allowing sometimes people to think outside the box and enabling them to do so, as long as it's within certain boundaries, allow the creativity to occur.
Yeah, and that's maybe one thing that was a positive with the pandemic, is because it was uncharted territory for a lot of us. There were, I think, a lot of pretty interesting out-of-the-box type thinking, and I think some of the best leaders in our field were able to tap into their creative people in their departments to do that. So, good. Good. I'm sure there are some more, but just in the interest of time, I want to just talk. So Wooden was a very interesting guy. So he, I just want to use my notes here. So he had a great quote that about preparation. So during the games, he actually didn't coach much during the games. He held a rolled-up program very tightly, and he seemed very tense. But he just sat on the bench, and he wasn't up strolling the sidelines and yelling instructions to everyone. He just kind of sat there, because his idea was that through practice, that's how we prepare for the games. And during the games, the team should be able to kind of figure it out. And he relied a lot on his more senior leaders of the team, to do that. So he actually wasn't. Again, you got to win this game, or you've got to play better right now, or you need to do this. He actually sat back and let the team kind of do what they needed to do. He has a great quote. It was called "Failing to prepare is preparing to fail." So failing to prepare is preparing to fail. And he would demonstrate when the first practices of the year, he was so detail-oriented. Back then, there weren't the high-tech socks, so typically basketball players wore 2 pairs of kind of thin wool socks. And he showed the players in the locker room how to put the socks on very carefully, the 2 layers of socks, and how to lace up usually their Converse sneakers, the old canvas sneakers at the time that are so popular now with kids again. But and he would actually show players how to put their socks on. And so that was his failing to prepare. It's because he didn't want people to miss practice because their feet blistered, because those sneakers were pretty bad about causing blisters. But anyway, but it was just an example of I'm going to show you today how to put your socks on. And so. And he had a thing about, and I think it's very applicable to emergency medicine, be quick but don't hurry. So being, on top of things, moving quickly but not hurrying, because when you hurry, then you tend to make mistakes. And then just the value of a diverse team and viewpoints. He said, surround yourself with smart people who will argue with you. And he had 2 examples. Someone, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who was, back then he was named Lou Alcindor before he had a change in faith, but he was an activist kind of guy. He's a brilliant guy who writes great op-eds now, and just a very thoughtful person in the realm of DEI right now, even as a retired basketball player. And then he had Bill Walton, who was kind of an outgrowth of the 60s, a very difficult guy to control and to manage as a coach, but he embraced that because he knew their viewpoints were ethical and that they were trying to improve society. But so just examples. I think if you learn from the people that are the great role models and who did demonstrate what we're going to call auto leadership, it can be really great. So just to mention a little bit about recognition and reward. So it's really important that you recognize, obviously, your team that's doing well. But just think of the last time when someone said to you, "Wow, great job," or "I just want to take you aside and say that I really admire how you did this or that." Think of how good that makes you feel. And it's one thing to say it to the team, but I think it's important that the recognition and reward get down to the individual. Money isn't the currency here for recognition and reward. People will appreciate, a bonus or incentive pay or whatever, but it's really about the personal congratulations or praise for the work. And I just think it's really important. This HR expert says that, it's not a scarce resource. It doesn't cost you any more money to take someone aside or to acknowledge them, in a faculty meeting or in some forum, to say, wow, we just want to call out so-and-so because they did a great job with this project. So just, remember that in terms of auto leadership. I think that's a really key concept, is recognition and reward. So then there's, to get into the idea of succession planning, and there's the whole thing of what if you were hit by the bus? And this excerpt, I think this was in England, where a guy a couple times dressed up as Superman was trying to do this skit where he was filmed, stopping a bus, and actually he got hit by the bus and not injured. He didn't get killed or anything, but he's even got the little swirly of the Superman. If you look at the old Superman thing, so he really did it up well, but he made a mistake and actually got hit by the bus. So again, it's fundamental that if you're an auto leader, you're looking at the health and the growth of your entity overall. So it goes way beyond you, and you need to think about not just what you're doing now, but how you're going to have succession planning. And this doesn't need to be just at the chair level. I mean, as a program director or an emergency medicine clerkship director, you have to think about what's next and who are the people coming up that I can help mentor and who can grow into the position. And so, it's a continuous process. I mean, we're actually doing a lot of this at Michigan, where we have a very senior level, at the professor level of our faculty, and just a lot of people that have been in positions for a long time. We had a chair that was a chair for 40 years. I mean, it's even kind of obscene, because for the last 15 years, people didn't think this chair was doing a very good job. And so you have to, I think, have turnover. It's really important from the DEI standpoint, obviously. And other fields, if you look at even at University of Michigan, if you look at other schools, the chairs often have 3-year terms, and it's just understood that they're going to cycle. And in academic medicine, we don't tend to take that approach, and we see people serving for long periods of time, maybe with the exception of deans, who tend to turn over because it's such a tough job. But anyway, what we're doing now in Michigan is we're trying to include succession planning for everyone, just to think about how long you're going to be in this role, and during the annual evaluation, we're just trying to pull that in. And then as someone is expressing that they might be thinking about transitioning, we actually do an interview with them. So our faculty development office does an interview with them, and we try to get a good idea of not just their position description, which is usually a one-pager, but what's your position profile? Like, what do you do? Where do you spend most of your time? There might be what's written down for the position, and then there's the things that you actually do in terms of a week of your time. And so we develop these profiles, and then we start having in-depth planning and discussion with people, even a couple years before they're ready maybe to do a transition. And we're just in this work now, but it's been pretty interesting to see if you confront people with the idea that they need to think about their succession planning, some really good ideas come up. So I'm going to go through some cases with you, but just wanted to put these principles out there, and I won't read all of them, but just the importance of the MVV, the recruitment aspects, that you're the orchestra leader, the importance of DEI and viewpoints and philosophy, delegation to the point of discomfort. So especially as an early leader, you really need to be able to delegate to something to someone else, and it's making you feel a little bit squeamish, and you just need to let them run with it, and then you'll figure out, they actually did pretty well, or you figured out how to manage that, and then you'll delegate more, but really, really important. And I think it's one of the antidotes to burnout is delegation. I mean, we really need to be able to do that more. So applying this now, I think you have to use Jim Collins' philosophy of what can you do now, a positive thing, create a little oasis of a positive environment within the overall aspects of your brutal environment. And so just choosing something that is maybe small, that can be a win in this case in terms of auto leadership, because some of the things that we're dealing with our institutions are just so big to try to solve the whole thing at once, like boarding an emergency department. But what can you do on a smaller scale? And then, excuse me, I like Bruce Springsteen, and one of his songs, excuse me, it's called Reason to Believe. It's kind of a weird song. It starts out by there's a dead dog in the ditch and everything, and I got it stuck in my head, and it's not one of my favorite songs of his, but I had it stuck in my head all morning, but anyway. But I think this quote is still at the end of every hard-earned day. It's a lyric. People find some reason to believe it. And you, as an auto leader, you've got to remind them of that reason to believe. And it may just get back to your mission and vision. And sometimes I know I sound corny, always harping on mission and vision. But if people believe that you believe the mission and vision, they're more likely to think, well, maybe that is important. And so I just think giving people a reason to believe is really a key thing. All right, so let's do some cases. So the pandemic, as you know, makes everyone change their work life so that many people are working from home. Many people are doing Zoom. And let's say you're a chair and you're a little bit concerned that within the nice offices that you just lobbied the dean to get, that they're now all empty and there's no one around. You even made a communal area where people could get together and have lunch and talk about things and make great ideas, and you had it all set up, and now it's just not happening. So say you want to create those opportunities, what might you do? Or do you have any examples? I mean, we're struggling with this right now. Like, how do you get people back together in a meaningful way? So think auto leadership here.
One thing you can do is just solicit, by a survey or something, anonymous survey of ideas that the faculty might have of what is going to work best for them. Whether it be spacing or whatever, where you can still get together, but maybe alleviate some of the healthcare concerns with it, but maybe tapping into the faculty to see what great ideas they might have.
Great.
As a part of it.
Yeah, so take it to the group that probably are feeling the same thing, right? I've heard it from faculty. Okay, so yes.
We ran into this, so our faculty meetings were all online, of course, for 2 years. And then we said once a quarter we're going to have our faculty meeting in person. We kind of offer two options, which is once a quarter or all faculty meetings. And there was probably 2/3 of the people wanted to just do the once a quarter, but at least they got people in the room together talking, which was a success.
Did you change the nature of the meetings then to allow more kind of innovation or communication or socialization, or was it still the same format for the meetings?
Well, it was the same format as was pre-COVID.
Yeah.
Right, where they were in person. We have talked about, so we used to have social events after, because the meetings ended about 3 and a lot of people will go to a restaurant or something. We have not implemented that yet, but I think that's probably the next step, just to get people together in a social setting, which I think builds camaraderie.
Yeah, that's what I said. Good. Yes.
Yeah, we use the afternoon of our residency conference days as faculty day. So conferences are done at 12 and 1 at the residence, and then all of our scheduled meetings, or even stuff that has to be scheduled on the fly, everybody's expected, or most people are around in the offices on Thursday afternoons, and they're not scheduled electronically. So it makes it easy to get people together, or just walk across the hall and discuss some ideas.
And so that's 1 day a week then?
Yeah, one day a
Yeah,
week.
so that's
Yep,
good. Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of places where the offices are just ghost towns. I mean, there's just, so good. Other thoughts? Yes.
Because I was new, it was an opportunity to restructure at the end, well, not the end, some sort of interim period of COVID. And we actually changed the structure of the faculty meeting to be less about information sharing, and we actually provided pre-work ahead of time and asked people for a discussion and decisions on certain topics. So it was, I think, more value add. And we still offer a hybrid option because of all our bizarre shifts. But,
Mhm.
we're actually asking for input rather than passive reception of information.
Interesting. Pre-work for a faculty meeting. I haven't heard others doing that. That's interesting thought. Yeah. Art.
I think it's a mistake to conflate using the office with getting people connected again. Because if it's about bringing people back to the office, and we fell flat on this, is you ask people to come back to work, be in the office, it doesn't sit well when they come to the office and spend 8 hours on Zoom sitting in the office. Right? That doesn't do anything. And so the flip is you want people to connect again, and then they may choose to use their office actually as a touchdown space for Zoom.
Mhm.
And so that I think is the model. So what we've tried to do to that is sort of similar to what others have mentioned, like micro examples of things that bring people back together. And so we're going to move our clinical operations meetings, which have been virtual for 2 years, that includes nursing and physician leadership, to, I said, I'll buy lunch for everybody at 11 afterwards. So now everybody kind of wants to come in because then you're going to get to go out to lunch
Mhm.
afterwards, right? Or acknowledging that some things, like our peer review process, will remain virtual because it's just much easier to do that in a virtual space than it is in person. Or similarly, sort of we've had our sections sort of start bringing people together to do section meetings and things like that as small group opportunities. But they don't talk about coming back to the office, because I think if you say come back to the office, you conjure up all kinds of other emotions and feelings.
Great. Great. Thanks. Yeah, good insights. Yes.
I would say the open door of my chair has helped me want to be in the office more as one of the people that requested him, because I can get that 5 minutes of FaceTime that I can't get easily on Zoom. You can't make appointments. And I don't know if it's everybody should have an open door when they're not in a meeting, or encouraging others to be present with an open door. I don't know, like, but I feel like having an open door lets you check in with folks that are in the office when you're there too.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's. I've heard. I think many chairs will adopt an open door for a period of time. Although I think some don't. But who was that? I think Nate Cooperman, UC Davis. It's known that I think from 7 to 8 or 8:30 every day he has an open door, and it's literally open. He's there doing work, and he will invite people to come in. And so, but it ends at I think at 8. It's still pretty early. So if someone really wants to come in, they have to get up a little early to meet with Nate. But I think that's something that his faculty have viewed as really valuable. So.
That's what Bob Hockler uses to help manage his own time. Remember?
Yeah.
As well as then allows that open door. So he puts clear boundaries around
Right.
it, but it allows you to stay efficient.
Yeah. Great. All right, let's go to another case. So you're a male emergency department medical director, and a senior woman physician comes in and says privately, meets you, a number of the women emergency physicians are concerned about the culture in the EDs. It's sometimes demeaning to them, bias against women physicians. So how do you respond and begin to address these issues? This would never happen, right?
I think it's going to depend on the regulatory requirements in one's own university or state. So for us, if there's any allegation at all, it becomes a Title IX investigation in a state university, which is maybe not always the best way to go. But to know about something and not then disclose that to Title IX actually opens us up to all sorts of legal.
Yeah, I'm dealing with that right now in my role in the dean's office of the individuals with reporting obligations, right? So, all right, so let's pretend that's not it. That's a whole nother thing. Again, I wish I could pretend something, because yeah, I could go on and on, but just so yeah, please.
So, I mean, that's a really good point, but
Yeah.
the first response, in my opinion, is curiosity. You need to sort of find out, well, what are the concerns? I mean, if you're in an area where mandated reporting the bar is extremely low, I think up front that has to come out, and then really first you have to say, I'm so sorry, I'm really interested in this. Here's the reporting requirements, and how do you want to go from here?
Yeah, I mean, obviously curiosity, want to know what's happening. Again, you want to know if this is one individual's perception or 15 individuals' perceptions. And as I know in my own university, it is an extraordinarily low bar. Any sort of width of possible gender or any type of bias requires we're mandated reporting officials.
And I think you brought up such a really, I don't want to have this whole be derailed into Title IX, but Title IX could be a barrier to people because they don't want to, I really want to make that big a deal of it, but I just want it addressed. And so you don't want to throw up Title
Other thoughts?
One of the things about this that really comes to mind is, when we're talking about leadership, we're talking about you in the department, and that's we're talking about faculty. But in the environment of emergency department, which is multidisciplinary, part of the things that add to the culture and environment are people that are outside of the answering structure, faculty, nursing, staff, ancillary people probably have even a bigger impact on the culture. So is this beyond this to say, like, how do you maybe get to like discuss like how when the issue is severely affected by things outside of your reporting structure or organizational hierarchy?
Other thoughts? Yes.
I'm curious why you put senior woman physician. Is that intentional? Like, is it different if it were not a senior woman physician? If it
No,
were
I think,
junior?
no, I was intentional, and because there's one way that I would think about handling this, and the fact that this person is senior would affect that.
I think it's a challenging situation, but also could be an opportunity, but I'm conflicted about this. In one sense, it's an opportunity to elevate the role of the senior woman physician to lead an investigation, or at least some sort of a forum in the faculty to discuss this even more. Oftentimes we skirt away from this conversation because it's uncomfortable, or perhaps we might uncover things that may be Title IX and much more uncomfortable, and yet it's something that people talk about. In another sense, I feel bad for asking yet another woman physician to lead this just because they're dealing with this. And so I think even having that conversation, opening that amongst the leadership team, that hey, this is an uncomfortable situation, and yet it exists. How might we address this in this moment, because we cannot continue to ignore it?
Great. Did you have a hand? No? Someone else, please?
I guess, building off of that, you might say, hey, senior lady, would you feel comfortable, I want to know more, would you feel comfortable leading this, you felt comfortable enough coming to me, but would you feel comfortable sort of leading this investigation? Maybe we can have a meeting in which you're leading it, and these other women are talking, and I am just listening. And I will not say a word, and we'll set up sort of that as the expectation from the beginning, and then
Yeah.
we can kind of go from there.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. So right, the way that I think I would have handled this when I was a chair would have been I need more information. Is it coming from the consultants? Is it coming from nurses? Is it coming from? There are my daughter who's an emergency physician, and she gets more flack from some of the women nurses than sometimes than others. But like, who's it coming from? And then then the question is like, are you there as a male chair sitting, listening, doing listening, which is listenings are important, or do you let that meeting occur to get more information and then go to having, as ED director, where you're going to be, in the mix and listening more. So, so I think it's there's a lot of different ways of approaching this, and then the whole reporting obligations thing just creates a lot of issues. Yeah.
I think even if you end up reporting to Title IX and there's an investigation, even if nothing gets validated, I think as a department, as a leader, it provides the platform to say, hey, this is important, and it provides the opportunity to actually have the discussions about perceptions of real issues. So I think there's advantage even if you end up having to report to Title IX.
Great. I'm just gonna. I just want to be sensitive to time. Oh, actually, go ahead. So I think here and here.
I will say though, however we decide to move forward with this, I think another important thing that happens is to acknowledge that this happened, this conversation happened, and that's some closure for the faculty that something is being done about it. Because oftentimes, especially if it's Title IX, we can't really talk about it because there's a lot more legal stuff, but yet whoever brought it up may not have a sense of closure, and then they think that nothing is being done.
That's a key problem, is that at least in our equity civil rights Title IX entity for the university, it can take them months, and this would not be viewed as a high priority, unfortunately, situation for them. So it could be months, and so we're trying to make sure that we can have discussions, interventions, because they were initially saying, no, you can't talk to anyone until we complete our investigation, and we're saying that can't happen because it's a controversial area right now.
At least in our institution, create more of a culture climate problem, not necessarily a bad apple problem. So I think, going back to what Willie was saying, I'd start with the question of, right, around whether or not in the early information gathering, is this a culture climate problem, something we need to address within the department broadly, or is this a bad apple problem? And if it's a culture climate problem, you can start having conversations and discussions around that in a way that is very sort of separate from some of the things that fall in Title IX.
Yeah, so interesting to get your perspectives, because this is something that's, I think, going to have to kind of sort itself out with the great intentions of our universities. It's creating some issues, I think, in terms of us moving forward.
Just want to make one point, Brian. Sorry.
Yes.
So the senior woman, other women went to her
Yep.
and not to the medical director. So that goes back to my point about a culture of safety, and that
Yep.
the other women ideally would feel safe enough to approach the medical director
Yeah.
directly.
Good. Thanks. Okay, let's give you another one. So you're appointed as the new residency program director, very excited. But at the monthly check-in with your vice chair of education, who you report to, you're told that the program coordinator and assistant residency program directors and even the EM clerkship director are all saying you're kind of micromanaging them, and you're somewhat disruptive to their work and to their teams. So how do you handle, so you're the new residency program, so how do you handle this as the residency program director, getting this feedback? Not the vice chair for education. How do you handle this as the residency program director? You just been told that you were micromanaging. Please.
I think listening to our meeting with people, seeing where they're coming from, seeing what works for them isn't, and just trying to make connections with them to help kind of build that team.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe you do this individually initially, like just to meet with folks and get their feedback, and then more as a group of kind of maybe you need to set a vision and kind of get everyone on board. But you need to establish that trust first with the team, and listen to them and see what their feedback is.
Yeah, great point. And when you call that meeting, you need to make sure that they're not thinking, oh no, more micromanaging is coming. So you have to be very clear about it. And whether you got the assistant program directors together, if you say you had 2 or 3 of them, and said, I'm sorry, I got off to a bad start here. I was, you might be able to do that, is 2 or 3 and get their feedback. But I think individually, kind of a setting, just kind of probably apologizing and saying, I need to change and I need your input on how I can best change. Yeah. Other thoughts? Yes. Yes.
I mean, I would imagine that maybe the micromanaging came from a good place of wanting to support them. So instead than having individual meetings, asking them specifically, I want to support you to grow and be the best EM clerkship director, whatever. How can I do that the best way possible?
Yeah. And some of it's a sense of responsibility. It's like, I'm the new program director. I need to know about what's going on with everything, so I need to get into the details of everything. And it just, getting that security that actually people can do their jobs. And this is all obviously about delegation and things. So other thoughts here? I mean, I think it's not tremendously complicated. Please.
It sounds like, going back to one of your earlier topics, a verbalization of trust in some way that makes them feel like you do trust them, even if the micromanaging was actually happening. It sounds like placing trust in them and making them know that you trust them might help that feedback that they feel you're micromanaging. I don't know if that would be something that might.
Yeah, it's hard, I think, once you have micromanaged to kind of put it back on reverse and say, okay, now please trust me that I trust you. So I mean, there's a little damage control that will need to occur, and there'll have to be a period where everyone's kind of saying, okay, are they really not micromanage me at this point? So, I'm sorry, for someone who hasn't spoken in the way back. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, both of you.
If my vice chair said something like that, I would like to know specific examples as to what incidents they are concerned about, because I might not have actual insight of what I was micromanaging. And then if those incidents were actually happening, and then I would like to look into why I was micromanaging to address that reason, because if it is actually because the work was not getting done, or was it a trust issue, so that I can address the reason that led to micromanaging?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of uncovering that needs to happen here. I think you're making good points here. Yes. Yes.
So just a comment, I think it's a great opportunity
And so kudos to the Vice Chair for Education for saying that person's doing their job very well. And last,
I think there's definitely a trust issue here, the fact that you're hearing from the vice chair and not from the individual
Yeah.
people. And so I think if you go back to the individual and ask them, you know, point blank, there's not that trust yet. I almost feel like you have to take a step back and do more general things like, how would you like to work with your immediate supervisor?
Mhm.
And just kind of in that generality, like, how would you like to be managed, essentially, but
Yeah.
in a more diplomatic way, and start with that.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. Yeah, you're going to have to go back and kind of restart here and you know, and say, I got off on the wrong foot here. So last case, and you have a couple minutes. So let's say you're an associate chair for diversity in your department, and for personal family reasons, you decide that you're going to step down. There's not anyone that's an obvious choice as a successor. Just how do you think about succession planning? What would your next steps be based on some of what we covered earlier here? Thoughts? Right?
You're going to need to talk with your chair and your personnel folks to see, is there an opportunity for you to have a vacancy, not just for this particular role, but in the department as well? Are you going to grow, or are you going to ladder? Are you going to pull somebody in from outside the organization to this position? And because you've got positions, you've got hours, because that's also part of the job, right? These are not purely academic. Very few of us are purely academic. We also have technicians. So if there's plentiful availability, is this an opportunity to pluck from somebody else's garden? And otherwise, looking towards who has that expertise that involved, how do you develop and build?
Good point. Yeah. So yeah, can you go external or not? Sometimes your institutions will say no. This type of position, actually, we tend to go internal. Other thoughts, sir? Yes.
You know, you say in the coming years, so you have a little bit of time. So the easy one here is to see who has interest, right? And even if there's no one obvious, sometimes interest count is 90% of the ball game. And so if you get one at least, but maybe 2 or 3 people that are interested, and you can see who steps up, give them little things to do, kind of build them up a little bit for this position.
Yeah.
I think that's probably the best way to find somebody if you're going
Yeah.
internal.
Yeah. If you have a little luxury time, yeah, that's a great point. Yes.
Yeah, I kind of want to build on that. I think for me, the sentence that jumped out is, no one is an obvious successor to you, right? And that's the thing. You always have a mental shortlist of people, but you're neglecting the rest of the 90 people
Yeah.
that's in this
Excellent point. Yeah. Excellent point. And there might be someone who's in another area but has a lot of interest in DI, and they just haven't maybe developed it, but they would leap at the chance for this, but they're not in your viewfinder. I think that's an excellent point. Yeah. Good. Well, I'm gonna go ahead and stop here and just kind of leave you with another image and thought is that the auto leader, if there is such a thing, but Neha thinks there is, but maybe we've learned about auto leadership, is that you're kind of creating the sparks that ignite the fire. You're the catalyst, but the team really should be tending the fire, providing the fuel, and then if it burns too low, then you maybe rekindle with some more sparks. But that idea that the auto leader is catalyst, I think, is really key, especially when you've got a workforce that's stressed, and as we know across emergency medicine with high burnout symptoms and like, you functioning as that catalyst as the auto leader is really key. So I'll close there. I'd be happy to talk with you more about your situations or any things you'd like to bring up later in the day. But thanks for your attention and thanks for your participation. I thought we had great input and discussions from everyone. So thank you very much.